I'm glad you're here today. Is this on? Okay. And I'm seeing that I don't have a lot of announcements, but come, whoever you are welcome here. No matter your age, your size, the color of your eyes, your hair, your skin, you are welcome here. No matter your gender, whom you love, how you speak, or whatever your abilities, you are welcome here. You are welcome here whether you come with laughter in your heart or tears in your eyes. You are welcome here. No matter what you've experienced in the past, no matter what awaits you in the future, you are welcome here. Whether you believe in God all of the time, some of the time, none of the time, you are welcome here. This is a community of open minds, loving hearts, and willing hands. You are welcome here at South Valley Unitarian Universalist Society. Good morning. My name is Lucy Malin. My pronouns are she and hers. Welcome to all of us gathered here in the sanctuary and those at home who are in our virtual audience. We extend a especially warm welcome to those of you who are with us for the first, second, or third time. We are so glad you are here with us, and we look forward to getting to know you. The starting point for our series for newcomers starts this afternoon at noon, and you're welcome to join us. No RSVP is needed. There is plenty of soup and bread to share, and children as well to share, and with the children for those, there is childcare for those who need it. Sorry, it's not real. Sorry. Our worship team today is our associate Reverend John Cooper, myself, Sutton Morgan, John Allen, Ricklin Nobis, Stephen Smith lead sound, Brenda Julander, Zachary Stickney, and I already said Sutton. So let's move on. We will now light the chalice, and today we will also light our memorial candle after the chalice, since we've experienced 2 deaths in the recent past. So if you stand, if you would like. Let us light our chalice. We invite you to stand in body or mind, and please read what is written in the order of service. We light this chalice for the warmth of love, for the light of truth, and for the energy of action. And Laura.
Thank you for remaining standing. Our community has experienced the passing of 2 beloved members and friends in just 2 weeks. So let's take a moment now just to acknowledge their presence that remains among us in spirit. This morning I announced with sadness that Danny Lynn Tingy and Joe Gates have both passed, and our memorial candle will burn this morning for both of them. Danny Lynn Tingy is survived by her wife, Sophia, and Joe Gates is survived by many of us in this congregation that have known him for his entire time of being in our community. He was one of our founding members and the last surviving founding member of this congregation. We hold both Danny Lynn and Joe Gates in our hearts this morning. Our faith and this congregation is dedicated to the proposition that we are all connected. that our differences and our diversities are not superseded by the unity that makes us one and binds us together, in spite of time and death and space between the stars. Let us pause in silent witness to that unity. May it be so. You may be seated. A memorial for Danny Lynn will be held next Saturday at 2 o'clock here at South Valley, and the memorial for Joe Gates will be announced after the holidays. For those who are feeling touched, especially in this time of grief, or who find the holidays particularly challenging, I would encourage you to join us this coming Tuesday at 7 o'clock here in the sanctuary for our annual Blue Christmas Tizay service. It's a candlelight meditation service dedicated just to holding space for all that is, led by myself and John, and we hope to see you there.
Good morning, church. My name is Rob Carlson. I serve as Director of Religious Exploration here at South Valley. My pronouns are he and him. And just had a couple announcements this morning for the good of the program. First, we will once again be partnering with Holiday United Church of Christ for OWL, Our Whole Lives, which is going to be offered beginning in January to our 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. You can contact Brenda Thomas. She's our OWL coordinator for South Valley. You can contact her if you're interested. You can also learn more and register on our church's website. Our Whole Lives is the lifespan healthy sexuality curriculum developed by the Unitarian Universalist Association and the United Church of Christ. Also, we had so much fun doing our RE pageant last year, the Latka who couldn't stop screaming. Anybody remember? Who was in it? I know Chris Berg was in it. Several of you were in that. So we had so much fun with that, and so we're going to do another one this year. Next Sunday, in fact. This year, we will meet Olive, a precocious, delightful doggo who believes herself to be part of Santa's sleigh team because she has misunderstood the lyrics of the song, All of the Other Reindeer. And so this coming Saturday, the 17th at 5 o'clock, we'll have a very brief, relaxed rehearsal here in the sanctuary, and then we will present All of the Other Reindeer during worship on the 18th, a week from today. So if your child or teen would like to participate, please go ahead and just go ahead and show up for the rehearsal on Saturday evening. If you can't be there on Saturday for the rehearsal, but still have someone who'd like to be in the pageant, just let me know. We will make it work. Otherwise, if your kid would be okay with a narrator part, which may be a little bit longer speaking part, or they would prefer not to have a speaking part, just let me know. After the pageant next Sunday, our families are invited to join us down in the social hall for some holiday card writing, crafts, and cookie decorating. This morning, childcare is available for children ages 3 and younger. Our childcare provider is Ethan Barnett. And finally, middle school and high school youth groups are happening right now this morning down in the annex. So as always, thank you all so much for your support of our religious exploration program. Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. Let's see. This community, our church, and its many ministries are only made possible by the gifts you give of your time, your talent, and your treasure. Many of you pledge monthly to support our work, and for this, we are grateful. Your gifts help to ensure that we are able to live our lives, our values of love and justice in that world outside. Part of our ministry at South Valley includes sharing our Sunday worship offerings with a charitable organization.
You need to do the time for all ages.
Oh,
The head a little bit. Let's do our land.
I'm sorry, I'm having a confused day. Okay, so now Sutton is going to do a reading for the children.
Let's do the land acknowledgement here.
Oh, that's right.
We jumped ahead a little bit here this morning.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Let's do our land acknowledgement though, because we want to make sure and do that. And then we'll do our time for all ages. Do you want to do the hymn? Let's do the opening hymn here.
Shoot.
It's okay.
So, I have the wrong script. Sorry. John,
All right, let our worship be human. All right, so let's do our opening hymn now. All right, and then we'll do our land acknowledgement. We'll do the time for all ages, and then we'll get into the offertory.
301, stand and sing.
It is okay. We are all human.
3 verses.
I just didn't want to let you continue.
Touch the earth, reach the sky, walk on shores while spirits fly, over the ocean, over the land, our faith a quest to understand. Touch the earth, reach the sky, children ask the reasons why. In our lives the answers show, and by our love they learn to grow. Touch the earth, reach the sky, all are born, all shall die. Life's the time left in between, to follow a star, to build a dream.
Yeah, let's do it. I'll do it. We'll read it. Okay. You can stay with me. Just stay right with me. I'm going to find our land acknowledgement here, and then I'm going to read it. As we gather this morning, we do so on the ancestral and current homelands of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes. As Unitarian Universalists, we acknowledge the complex and violent history that resulted in the stealing of these lands and the cultural and physical genocide perpetrated against its peoples at the hands and policies of white colonial settlers. We commit ourselves to undoing those harms, and we seek to authentically and with honesty engage in the necessary work that will produce justice for those disenfranchised and that promotes healing for the whole of the earth and all of its peoples. All right, let us do our time for all ages, please.
All right. So I would like to invite any young or young at heart to come on up for a story. It is story time. Come up, come up, come up. Yes, get the best seat if you're hustling, right? You gotta get a good seat. Come on up. Squeeze in. We got more? Yes, we got more. Everybody's hurrying up. You guys can fill up here if you want to. You want to get in close so you can see the pictures good. All right. Good deal, good deal, good deal. Hello, hello. Good morning, you guys. So I have a story here. It's called My Yellow Balloon. And it was written by Tiffany Papageorge, who is the sister of one of my old grade school friends. And I had no idea she wrote this until a few years ago, and we got to meet and talk, and it was super fun. Yes? Well, we're reading this story because of what it's about and how it's going to tie in with kind of some of the things that we're learning about today, which is about grief and loss. So it's got some sad parts, okay? Well, hopefully you'll be okay with this. It's a really good story. And it's illustrated by Erwin Madrid, and he's worked with DreamWorks and with Pixar, so he's a really awesome illustrator. All right, so My Yellow Balloon. Here we go. Oops, I skipped. Sorry. Here we go. At last, the carnival had come to town. Joey dashed through the grand entrance. His parents could hardly keep up with him. Joey smelled the buttery popcorn, and he heard the happy music that sang out to him, and he ran around and he could see all the sparkling lights, and the carnival men on the midway called out, "Step right up," right? He was so excited. His parents had to tell him to slow down so that they could not lose him in the crowd. Then Joey saw something amazing. Hundreds of big, bright balloons floating up, and as if enchanted. They were floating in the air like a cloud of many colors. Joey walked up to them. The old man drew Joey in with his deep voice. "Would you like a balloon?" he said. "Oh, yes, sir." "Which one, Joey?" asked his mother. Oh. Without even looking, the old man reached and grabbed a string and said, "This is your balloon, Joey." Without a moment of even checking, and it was this beautiful yellow balloon that sprang forward. The man tied the balloon string around Joey's wrist and said, "Here, let me tie you two together." From that moment on, they were never apart. Every morning in the summer sun, as it skipped through Joey's window, the birds sang, the two buddies, Joey and his balloon, would go through their adventures. And the neighborhood dogs would bark, and the bees would buzz, and they would watch the two as they played. When the day closed its eyes and the moon winked and the stars shone down, Joey kissed his yellow balloon goodnight. "I love you so much. I can't wait for tomorrow." Then Joey drifted into sleep and would dream magical dreams, knowing that he and his balloon would be together in the morning, and his balloon would stand guard over him. Then one day, in 1 second, everything changed. Joey and his yellow balloon were playing, and somehow, some way, it slipped off of his wrist. It began to float away before Joey knew what was happening. "Come down," Joey called out. His yellow balloon reached out its string with all of its might, but it couldn't come down. Joey watched through the blur of his tears as his yellow balloon flew higher and higher. He didn't take his eyes off of it until the moment it disappeared into the endless blue sky. It was sad. Joey ran to find his mother. See how he's feeling? My yellow balloon, it's gone," Joey sobbed. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, "let's go get you a new toy. That will make you feel better." "No, all I want is my yellow balloon. Get it back," Joey demanded. "Please, I'll do anything if you get it back." "I wish I could," she said. Joey stomped into his room to be all by himself. Joey felt angry. He felt confused. He felt so very sad. I wish you would come back, Joey sighed. He cried and cried and cried some more. And he cried so hard, he fell into a dream, so real. And in his dream, Joey's yellow balloon was with him. And they both started to fly past the rustling trees, past the soaring birds, past the mountain peaks, and into the depths of Joey's universe. Far away, he heard. Wake up, Joey. Dinner's ready. He opened his eyes, and he remembered his yellow balloon was gone. And his tears came tumbling out again. His mother and father held him close until he felt safe and loved. The rest of the summer, Joey missed his balloon all of the time. Then one day, he was sad most of the time instead of all of the time. And as time passed, he was sad a lot of the time instead of most of the time. Then the day came that Joey felt sad only some of the time. During one of those some of the time days, Joey's mother took him to the park to feed the ducks. The cool air wrapped around him, while the dark clouds of spring hung like huge sacks of treasured rain. Joey felt something warm and tingly on his back. Something caught his eye in the water. It was bright and yellow. Joey's heart did a fast somersault in his shirt. "My yellow balloon?" he whispered. Joey spun around and looked up. It was so bright he couldn't see. He reached up to grab its string and pull it to him, but there was no string. It wasn't his yellow balloon at all. It was the sun. It had been so long since Joey noticed the sun. It reminded him so much of his yellow balloon. He had to smile. Once more, in 1 second, everything changed. Tenderly, the sun warmed him. "I still miss you," Joey said. "But whenever I see the sun, big and bright, I'll feel you with me. Whenever I am, wherever I go, you are part of me and I am a part of you. We're part of each other forever and ever." And there's the end. That is all the people that they are thanking. And that's the end. Okay. I hope you guys liked that. Take care.
We're going to stay seated for just a minute.
Oh, thanks, yes.
Hello, everyone. We enjoy teaching your kids religious exploration classes on Sundays. And last Sunday, we taught this topic as giving. And with our kids in my group, we made a painting, especially for Rob. Thank you, Rob, for everything you do for our kids. And please give some applause for Rob. This is done by kids for Rob.
This is beautiful. Thank you all so much. Love you all. This is so cool. Well, with that, if you would like, we have activities in your classrooms downstairs. If you'd like to join us. We also have our child care downstairs as well.
Okay, now we'll do the offering. And I'll just try to keep it short. Thank you all for your time and your treasure and your talent at what makes this congregation go. And we do have to keep the building warm, keep the lights on, pay our staff. But we also need your talent and the time you give to this community to make it a home for all of us. I just wanted to say one thing. I'm ringing on that harmony. On the hymnals, if you look right here, there's the name of someone who was important in the past to this community. This is Adeline Polovoy, who was one of the original or very early members, and a wonderful woman. And I come in, I look at who my hymnal is dedicated to, and I just take one moment to bring that person into my mind and think of who they were, because they were an important part of the treasure of this church. So let us read the words that are in your order of service. We are this church. We are its hands, its heart, its voice. Together, we share the wealth of this community and sustain it with our gifts. And the choir will now perform.
Because of how our children's project that's kind of observing a little bit of our solstice today, a little bit further.
We
For all we have received, all we have found the courage to give, may we be truly thankful. May these gifts be a blessing to South Valley. And who was our share this morning? Thank you, the Christmas Box House. Sorry, I just drew a complete blank all of a sudden. May they be a blessing to both of us. May it be so. Thank you. Let's do this. This morning for our prayer and meditation, and in lieu of a ritual of joy and concerns, since my sermon's going to talk about grief and loss, and we've been through some grief and loss lately, I wanted to do a self-compassion moment, a self-compassion meditation exercise. This is from the work of Dr. Kristen Neff, and I learned this morning some people in our community have been to some workshops and some practices with her. The concept of self-compassion is that we deserve the compassion that we would extend to others. And Dr. Neff's work provides an alternative for self-talk to the ego-driven, goal-oriented, kind of self-pushing that many of us do. There are three basic principles in self-compassion. I'll describe them and then we'll give them a try. The first is self-kindness versus self-judgment. Instead of speaking to ourselves as we might critically, we seek to speak to ourselves with the compassions and kindness we might offer another. Common humanity versus isolation. We pause to think about and recognize that others suffer as well, and even in the midst of our own suffering, to remember that we are not alone in it, and to remember the suffering of others. Mindfulness versus over-identification. And sometimes we over-identify with painful things and thoughts, as if they were the entirety of our world. And so being mindful and remembering that this is one moment, as our children's story was telling us this morning. So let's try it. I want you to think about something burdensome to you, something that's on your heart and mind this morning, maybe even that's been burdening you for a while. And as you start to feel it activate your emotions and your feelings, let's try our self-compassion. So close your eyes or look down and allow that to create a small sense of privacy in a room full of people. And first, express caring and kindness for yourself. Remind yourself that yes, this is hard. And yes, it's okay for it to be hard. And that you care for yourself. And that it matters that it's hard for you. And then the common humanity versus isolation. Pause to think about the room. It is likely that everyone in this room is thinking about something that weighs heavily on their heart and mind. Some hearts may be more heavily burdened than others, but probably all of the hearts have a burden. And some are as burdened as yours. Notice your body and notice how the emotion has moved and shifted in your body for a moment of mindfulness. Notice your thoughts about the emotion and your sense of self. Watch the emotion as it moves around in you and as it shifts. Remember that your feeling, your sentiment, the thing that's weighing on your heart is but one piece of who you are. And let us pause now in this centered place we are to extend our compassion and kindness to those burdened hearts around us, to those who have lost. Be kind with yourself and be kind with the rest of the community. May it be so. Amen.
Who do you think you are? Hey there, big stuff. Yeah, you there, hiding between rock and stone, whispering on the night wind, touching the dawn rays and dying leaves. Just who do you think you are? You make us with joy, feel my soul with songs sung through moving, turning, twisting reflection, danced 1,000, no, 1,000,000 times in communion, revelation, sung with arms and feet, torso and head, leaping into the stars and crouching into the earth. And you took it. Just who do you think you are? To take that. Maybe I gave it to you, I can take it away, like some angry, bitter mother, feeling unappreciated, broken. Is that you? What is that? Was I not grateful enough for the joys you gave me? You had to take them away so I could really understand? Just who do you think you are? Or did I do that?
Morning. I want to acknowledge that it's been a little bumpy up here this morning. And I want to tell you that when I coordinate worship like once a year, that I don't exactly know what I'm doing. Right? And that reflects in everyone around me when that happens. So my name is Reverend John Cooper. I'm a UU minister in full fellowship, ordained by and affiliated with this community. And my full-time ministry is as an association of professional chaplains, board-certified chaplain at Huntsman Cancer Institute. I'm also the co-chair of the UU Society for Community Ministry APC Chaplain Endorsement Committee. So if any of you need, non-ministerial endorsement, call me. And a founding leader of the UUMA Community Ministers chapter. And thank you. I rarely get to hear my poetry read, and that was something. I didn't expect to be quite as affected as I was. I'm called to be and we'll talk more about that poem in this sermon. I'm called to be an oncology chaplain. My affiliation with South Valley means that once in a while I get to bring reflections from that ministry into this pulpit. I see my Sundays in this pulpit as a way to try to bring some piece of the sacred or awe-inspiring spirit and presence that I find in healthcare into this community. My poem, Who Do You Think You Are?, was about a particular type of my own grief and loss. A type of loss that seems to pass somewhat unseen in everyday life, but which seems so highly visible to me in the halls of the hospital. When I wrote that poem, I did not understand the loss the poem is about. Grief theory wasn't a framework available to me yet wasn't available to me in 2013 when I wrote that. I barely understood what grief was at that point in my life. I came from a family where the written script was to soldier on through your feelings, which works great as long as the feelings don't get too heavy. Mine did. Since then, I have recognized how much more understanding might have helped me find my way. It might have changed my life, in fact, in some ways. And so I wanted to share some of that understanding I've gained with you this morning. When I spoke here last, I spoke about a reconciliation with death and loss. My purpose then was to try to articulate how accepting the inevitable reality of our own death can help lead us to explore what that means to us, which can lead to exploring wants, needs, and options, which in turn can open new options, create new agency, and may allow us to have more of the type of end of life we want to have. We have had some very significant deaths in our community lately. There is an acute severity to losing someone intimate. The loss is so severe that when it happens to us, many of us cannot imagine how we will get through it. And I want to say that also is entirely understandable. When we find the pain of loss just too hard to talk about, and when we lose someone intimate or important, that pain is so acute, even if we prepare for it, We still might not know how we get through. Yet the simple truth is that most of us do. As horrifying, as gut-wrenching, and overwhelming as loss can be, somehow we humans usually find our way. It's a remarkable thing that humbles me to witness. I really cannot explain it, even after watching it dozens, if not hundreds of times. It reminds me that no matter how much my ministry teaches me about what we humans go through, no matter how much theory I learn to model my experiences or explain what we are and what we do, there's still a lot more going on than any of us actually understand. We're close to the solstice here. This is the time of year for small lights in the darkness. I believe every Christmas or Hanukkah light, every single solstice light, in fact, every light lit by people in this time of year in the dark has its origin in the same corner of human experience. Some moment in our lives, sooner or later, each of us finds ourselves alone in some darkness, holding one small light, wishing there was more. Just like our seasons do every year. The skies darken, the light of the sun fades, and our beloved Mother Earth finds herself in the darkness with us. And then every year, inevitably, however dark it seems, the light returns and we find it to be spring again. I think that's why we light small candles in the darkness. They represent the faith that one day the loss and cold of winter will end. Spring will come again, renewing us and presenting us with a new world. It's a metaphor nature gives us every year to study and learn from, each time the wheel of the year turns round. There are two authors, Kenneth Mitchell and Herbert Anderson, who wrote a book called All Our Losses, All Our Griefs. It's one of the most comprehensive grief theories I've ever read. The book is short, actually. It's only about 170 pages. Packed full of content. And even though the ideas in it seem applicable everywhere in my cancer hospital, and in fact throughout all of healthcare, All Our Losses, All Our Griefs is not all that well known. In secular circles, like medical schools, social work, or palliative medicine, it's just not that commonly known about. It was written in the 1980s, actually, so it's even been around a long time, right? But it was written by a couple of modern Christian theologians, and the language is deeply Christian, which might explain part of why it hasn't caught on in more secular circles. I don't know. I had to translate it for myself. You might have to as well if you decide to read it, but the translation was worth it, and the theory work is very strong. In fact, I had a recent conversation with a highly capable, highly trained, wonderful palliative provider whom I deeply respect, who was standing at the doorway of my office going, right? Mind utterly blown when I said, grief is not just about death, and presented him with a summary of this theory. He said it was like everything he had studied and learned about grieving practices just expanded to touch everything else he knew. Mitchell and Anderson lay out 7 types of loss. That theory presents loss and grief as being about a lot more than death. I want to wander through the types of loss they present briefly. Material loss, the loss of important things, places, like a family heirloom, a home, important funds. Now, to understand, some of us might think, well, consumerism, or detachment, but to understand how severe material loss can actually be, think about losing your home, your entire life savings, or the only heirloom you have left from someone beloved. Relationship loss, loss of important relationships by any means, death, divorce, estrangement. This is probably the loss everyday culture most easily understands. And we're going through it together now due to some recent deaths in our community. Intrapsychic loss, big word. Loss of an emotionally important sense of self. This can be a hard loss to understand or conceptualize, but it's important as it touches on our sense of worth and our sense of purpose in the world. I'll say more. Functional loss, loss of physical capacity or ability from illness or injury. This I see in so many hospital patients. And actually, most of us go through it as we age. It is part of the grief of the aging process. Role loss, when we lose a role that was important to us. Many of us face this loss when we retire. I hear it all the time from patients who happen to show up in the hospital around retirement age, how much they're grieving the loss of their vocational, their career identity. It has a lot of, that loss, the role loss, has a lot more impact on us than modern culture would tell us it does, right? Anyone who has ever been fired or laid off understands that loss. Systemic loss. This one is also hard to conceptualize. Mitchell and Anderson actually talk about how they were forced to include it by their interviews, right? Humans are not isolated individuals, sometimes, but it's not our natural way. We live engaged and as a part of social systems, and our faith acknowledges that, talking about our interconnected web of life. Losing those systems also hurts. A common form of this loss, and one of the ones from their interviews, is described by the term empty nesters, which reflects the truth that taking one's adult children off to college changes the intimacy of the family system forever and is a loss, even as we celebrate the graduation and integration of those children into the social system of adulthood. There are many in this community who have experienced that loss, and the term empty nesters describes emptiness in the nest. Now, besides those 7 types of loss, Mitchell and Anderson also named several variables that change how we experience loss. Avoidable and unavoidable loss. Some loss comes as the result of a choice we made. And it can be important to understand that idea because sometimes it leads us to blame ourselves or others when we're grieving. I hear this often in a cancer hospital about every behavior that might have given a patient cancer. The grief over the accidental or the choice of the past is profound. Temporary, permanent loss. Not all loss is permanent. For example, a married partner whose spouse has to go off to war, but then gets to return. That's an acute, non-permanent loss. Actual versus imagined. Now, you might wonder why we need to talk about imagined loss. I'm not going to say a lot, but just our thoughts define us. A loss in our thoughts can be as acute as any other loss. An anticipated or unanticipated loss. All right? An anticipated loss is one that we expect to happen, so we're trying to prepare for it. An unanticipated loss is one that blindsides us. Those I see all the time in the ICU. That was a lot of theory for a sermon. So you know what? You don't have to remember all of it. Actually, you probably don't need to remember any of it. What you do probably want to remember is that there were a bunch of different types of loss that I talked about. There were many, and then there were like other variables, and they make a lot. That's probably what will be helpful, all right? Because that'll probably help you notice if you're going through more than one of those losses and help you take care of yourself and the associated grief. Let's spend some time in a case study. This is one of my practices that we do professionally. Let's spend some time in a case study. Let's use me, right? For several reasons, not because my narcissism says that I'm the most important case, although it's true, that's true, it does. Or because of my ego, which tells me you all really want to know about my case, and even if that is true, it's not actually relevant. No, I use my own case from the pulpit because for 2 reasons. The first is practical, the second is emotional. I'll share both with you. The practical one is because I cannot accidentally violate HIPAA when I am talking about myself. I inherently give myself permission to say whatever I say about myself from this pulpit. And I do not want to have to crowdfund a HIPAA fine, which is what I would have to do because HIPAA fines are no joke, right? I would have to crowdfund one if yeah. All right, so the emotional reason will become apparent as I continue to talk. The poem Sutton read, "Who Do You Think You Are?" is about my spinal column injury. Many of you know I fell in 2008 and I got a C5-6 spinal column injury. My injury and my experience as a rehabilitation patient are part of my calling to healthcare ministry. I was a hospital patient long before I was a minister or a chaplain. For those of you who have not heard and want more of the story, you can probably find it in the South Valley Unitarian Universalist Society YouTube channel in a sermon entitled The Power of the Moment. On the American Spinal Injury Association Impairment Scale, ASIA, I am an ASIA grade D. My impairment is incomplete, which is why it is hard to see the impairment, but I promise it's there. I have significant permanent paralysis and sensory loss. My muscles function over grade 3 on a strength scale, which can mean they can effectively move against gravity, right? So I can stand up and walk. Sometimes, though, they aren't that strong and I fall down. I also have nowhere near the usual degree of sensation, balance, or coordination, and I never will, no matter what I do. It will never get better. I have about 30% of a spine visible in my neck on an MRI. And while I've learned to make that 30% do a whole lot, all of our nervous systems get less dynamic, less flexible with age. And while I age, my functional spine ticks down 30%, 29.5%, 29%, and so on. In later years of life, I might not be able to stand up anymore. We'll have to wait and see. And considering how much I force this body to do with that 30%, the gradual change is actually noticeable to me. To live in this world, the pace that it moves, to do the work I feel called to do, this nervous system, I push this body, this nervous system to its limits, something I learned to do as a Kung Fu practitioner. And at those limits, I can actually notice and feel the loss happen. It is terrifying, and it is relentless and burdensome. When I wrote Who Do You Think You Are?, I hadn't yet read Mitchell and Anderson's classic work on grief. I didn't have any of the theory to model what I was going through. But when I look at my poem using the theory now, the poem seems to articulate several of the types of loss. One of them is a somewhat obvious functional loss, singing with my arms and legs and torso, expressing joy through movement. I was talking about my Kung Fu, which I no longer have enough of a spine to do. But even more profound, there's an intrapsychic loss in that poem, maybe not quite as obvious. I spent decades, upwards of 20 hours a week, programming my muscle memory with 37 different systems of Shaolin Kung Fu. Choi Lei Foot, monk form, drunken style, sabers, staff, internal systems, Xing Yi, Bakua, Tai Chi. I was an accomplished Kung Fu practitioner. I have a closet I never look at, full of medals from competition. An example of an acute intrapsychic loss is the profound spiritual loss of my Kung Fu muscle memory. I worked for decades to build up that memory, and in an instant, it was gone. When I returned to try and practice Kung Fu, I discovered that the body felt so different, none of the muscle memory could get activated. It was all gone. It was a loss that took me maybe 10 years to learn how to grieve. The poem is also an example of role loss. I no longer identify as a Kung Fu practitioner or a martial artist. Don't get me wrong, though, I can still fight. I fought full contact, and in sport sparring, in fact, a competitor, like 15 years younger than me, was once told by his teacher to knock me out, you know? It was like totally, one of those like Kung Fu story or martial arts story moments, right? Knock him out. And actually, he tagged me. And we were in a match where we weren't supposed to be hitting each other. It was a point match, right? So he tagged me. You can see it in a video. My head like goes, whoosh, and I go boom, 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 backwards, and then sit down and pass out. The judges offered to disqualify him. When I woke up, I was hearing, we'll disqualify him. Right? See, Sutton remembers this, right? I said no. I got up from the knockout. I walked forward, and I won the match. Fighting is in the mind and spirit and not just the body. And if I were to fight today, my body would look like a train wreck, falling over off balance, stumbling, but I might very well be the one remaining when it was done. Believe me, I still do. And you can hear it in my voice. That is a part of my warrior identity I still cling to. Part of the intrapsychic loss I am just not ready to embrace. And in fact, once upon a time, and I see a few people in this community who knew him, once upon this time, a beloved CPE mentor, an Episcopalian priest, challenged that piece of the identity in front of others, right? He said in front of peers and others and employees that I could no longer fight. And I found myself genuinely asking my boss and mentor, do you want to call this meeting, go outside and see which of us can still fight, Father? I then got to talk extensively about how grief sometimes makes us angry and defensive of things we don't think we can stand to lose. But that piece of my identity as a Kung Fu warrior was at that time still such an acute and intrapsychic loss for me. I was honestly ready to fight my beloved boss to keep it, right? Maybe you noticed some relationship loss in that poem as well. The whole poem is about losing trust in my relationship with God. And though I do feel called to ministry through my injury, it is the moment of my calling. I also feel resentment and betrayal over it. And all of my conflicted feelings need their place in my grief, however contrary or dissonant they might be. To grieve well, I have to embrace them all and welcome them like honored guests. I should say here too, right, that I would not at this point choose to give up my spinal column injury. It has also if I had to also give up all of the things that it has taught me. Understand what I'm saying? There is my own small light in the darkness. For me, part of that light is making meaning from the loss. And here we are at my second reason for sharing it in this pulpit. I am making meaning of the loss right here, right now. I'm healing. Doing my grief work right here on this pulpit. Remember when I said before, I was talking about power we can claim if we can approach the topic of our own inevitable death, right? And today, I'm trying to talk about the power available to us if we can also embrace the reality of non-death loss, recognize it as a loss, learn that we need to grieve these losses as well. Understanding that we need to grieve means we can learn how to grieve. Learning how to grieve means we get to grieve. And grieving is the way we carry that small light in the darkness, through the darkness of all of our loss. Okay, enough about me. Let's do another case study in the last few minutes here. This is not a patient, it is many patients, or maybe none. The case is real, it's just not a person. The patient case after mine has a chronic pain condition. It is what we consider a manageable, lifelong condition. Manageable means pain crises, though, when symptoms flare up. And not just like, oh, it hurts. Pain crises like I can't think, I can't function. I'd rather be in a dark room curled up in fetal position on a bed. That kind of pain. Such crises can be avoided by regular checkups and clinic appointments. Diligent management of medication, early symptom detection. If our patient stays on top of things, they can probably live a pretty full life, and they have. How many types of grief do you hear in that story? There's anticipatory loss over pain crises that might happen someday. There's maybe intrapsychic loss, right? Who am I in this body that has to deal with this pain? Role loss, right? If it interrupts their work, their whole lives. And if that is what you knew of this case, what would you think if you learned that the pain med dosages were way more than appropriate for the degree of illness, or for the severity of the crises, or frequency of them? Yeah, some of you probably started to worry about medication abuse. And then if you found them laying silently alone in a dark room, would they seem stoned to you? Just staring at the wall, not responding to anyone? Yeah, let's add some more to their story. Our patient is a refugee who had to walk thousands of miles, who endured one unmanaged pain crisis after another to keep going and to survive and to make their body walk to get to their family. Oh, and they don't have funds for those regular clinic visits, right? They're uninsured. Their family and the family members they do have are busy working to try and pay for what life they can't afford. And if nobody's available to drive, that's okay, right? We'll call an Uber. Yeah, that's an obvious disconnect, right? How much grief and loss do you hear in the story now? Relationship loss, material loss, functional loss, and psychic loss. And now, if you found that patient laying silent in a dark room, would you wonder if they were grieving, maybe? If you had to figure out how to help them, would the intervention you'd pick be detox? Or maybe grief therapy? What do you think? How relevant is their grief and loss to the case medically? And I want to say something right here that's off my script very briefly because it came to me this morning, which is that one other thing you all can learn from this sermon is if you are in the hospital, right, and they ask how you're doing emotionally, answer. So many people do not. We are so trained to hide our feelings. We hide them even from our physicians. And that leaves out a piece of information, as you just heard, that leaves out a piece of information they need to care for you well. Don't leave it out. We have a concept in grief theory called compounded grief. It means that when we face more than one loss, our grief can get layered, even compacted. It gets stuck. We can't tell which feeling is connected to which loss, where it came from, or what grief work might help us with that feeling or that loss, right? So what do we do? And if you notice, like Justin Mitchell and Anderson's theory, we can go through one loss, right? And grieve it in so many different ways, it can get confusing. One thing I can tell you does not work is ignoring all the loss. I can tell you that from personal experience. It doesn't work. It comes out sideways. Like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, you put too much jelly on, you just press it down, ignore the loss. And, right there you can explain some of the behavior people get into when they're not doing their grief work and going through loss. Sorry, a story just came back that's not appropriate for the pulpit about that, but all right. There's quite a few, right? Human behavior when we're not doing our emotional work, yeah. I mean, it is okay to drink the bottle of whiskey that one hard night of grief, right? It is maybe not okay to drink the bottle of whiskey every hard night of grief. I'm going to tell you, like I tell hospital staff, you don't always have to choose the healthy coping, but it will turn out better for you if you choose it sometimes, or maybe at least half of the time. If you never pick it, that has its own consequences, right? So what do? There's this thing called grief work. It's hard work. It's also very useful and effective. It's the path through our grief and loss. Like I said, I'm doing some of my grief work this morning, right here. You may have noticed my hand shaking a little while ago as I was talking, right? Yeah. Grief work is not easy work. It's called work for a reason. But using my story gives the injury or loss a sense of purpose. And if there's one thing I've learned, I learned from thousands upon thousands of hours of Kung Fu practice, is that with a sense of purpose, boy, can I carry a lot of pain. A whole lot. And the more meaning, purpose I make of my injury, the stronger I get for handling the grief and loss it brings. But that's my wiring. It's my design. It's my my grief work. It's not necessarily yours. Everyone's grief work is a little different. But there's principles at play. Making meaning is one such principle. For some, visual artworks. My wife Sutton is one of those, right? When she goes into a deep moment of grief and loss, her emergence often comes with a piece of art, like the incredibly beautiful image of our beloved dog Memphis that sits on our mantle at home next to his ashes. My poems burst out of me like the emotions of grief. I hear a phrase, a few words for days on end. Sometimes the phrase fades, the work is done. Other times it echoes and won't stop until I have to write. There's so many words in me, right? And John's words are all but impossible to contain. You could ask anyone in the family I grew up with, or in fact, anyone who's ever tried to manage me professionally, right? Almost every boss I've ever had has commented to me that even though I report to them, it is nearly impossible for them to interrupt me. Words, words, words. That's why I'm still talking in this sermon. But don't worry, we're almost home here, all right? But for my grief work, the words are a gift. That particular poem brewed in me for a couple of years. My injury was 2008. That poem came out in 2013, right? I was saying, who do you think you are? In other phrases from that poem to God in my prayers for a long time. And then one day it was naming time and boom, poem dropped out. A few minutes. I've been learning more about my grief from that poem since then. To me, grief seems a bit like underwater springs in a forest. It burbles around, it bubbles, it roils underground. We get hints of it, but it's moving and shifting. We can't exactly see it. And then all of a sudden it erupts from one spring or another, surrounding us. We can try to compress it back down, cover the latest spring, try to not let it show. And in fact, sometimes there are even times when that's the way. There's a time for everything. We're not always in the places or times where our grief will be received or heard well. Those are the times to compress it. Right? But when we do compress those feelings, when we block off that string, it really is in our best interest to pick a time to come back and trouble the waters a bit. Let them erupt. To bring the grief back front and center. Engage in an activity. Bring it back after you have to suppress it. Another lesson left behind when the Kung Fu left me. Practice is a powerful, powerful thing. And it is by the practice of grief and the willingness to practice that we find our way in a season of darkness. Whether you find yourself in a global season of waning light here or a personal season of shadows, try to keep that faith. Hold on to the candle that says there is a way. Because for almost all of us, there is. And now we will extinguish our chalice, but definitely not the lights within. And Reverend Laura will come to help us extinguish our chalice and our memorial candle.
Thank you to ministering for us. Thank you. Let us now extinguish our memorial candle. The warmth of this candle will be gone and the light will cease to shine. But what of the brightness that it has given to our lives? That light shines still, though it is no longer part of this candle. That light is now part of the wider universe, part of the unity that binds us together forever. And so it is with the influence of Danny Lynn Tingey and Joe Gates, in whose memory this candle has burned this morning. In mystery we are born, in mystery we live, and in mystery we die. Blessings on their journey. We've been warmed by their presence here with us. And let us now also extinguish our communal chalice. Let's remain seated today for this one. We extinguish our chalice, but not the warmth of love, the light of truth, or the energy of action. And we hold each other in our hearts until we meet again.
Now we have a closing hymn.
This is a new one. 50. When darkness nears and embers die, the wind in trees a distant sigh, the end of day like a lover's voice nearby. The night draws close, a fond embrace, the heart then slows its frantic pace, and fear drifts off as a calm breath takes its place. The cradle of a velvet wing, it holds us in its gentle swing, and peace slips in with the songs our dreams will sing. The end of day, the passing year, the rush of time need cause no fear. We'll love the night and its mystery now so near. May the light of love shine upon you, out from within you, and be gracious unto you, and bring you peace, for this is the day you are given. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. And please be seated, or stay standing. I think we're singing our postlude, correct? Yeah, stay standing. We're going to sing for our postlude.
235. Sing if you know it. For the solstice that's coming soon. Deck the halls with boughs of holly, fa la 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 la. 'Tis the season to be jolly, fa la 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 la. Don we now our gay apparel, fa la 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 la. To roll the ancient Yuletide carol, fa la 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 la. Last verse. Fast away the old year passes, fa la 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 la. Hail the new ye lads and lasses and non-binary, la 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 la. Sing we joyous all together, la 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 la. Heedless of the wind and weather, fa la 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 la. Hooray!
Thanks.